Welcome to Real Time Review. I'm your host, Jesse Nussman. With me, as always, fellow Atlanta film critic Jason Evans.
Hey, buddy.
Jason, we have a very exciting movie to talk about that's coming out this weekend. We're talking David Fincher's The Killer, a very nihilistic assassin movie from the same director. If people don't know David Fincher, although most film fans, I think, probably do.
I mean, come on, wait, hold on. If people don't know David Fincher, Gone Girl, Social Network, Fight Club,
Zodiac. One of our great sort of masterful filmmakers. And this is his newest film starring Michael Fassbender as a perfectionist OCD assassin, essentially getting revenge on a variety of different people after a botched job in Paris.
I'm going to stop you right there because one of the remarkable things about this film is that you just told the entire plot.
It's a very spared down minimalist movie. I think it's probably his most stripped down movie in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it is so simplistic that I almost worry that it's not going to be lasting the way, look, people go back and rewatch Fight Club and The Social Network and Gone Girl and many of Fincher's other films over and over and over again. I'm not sure that this one's going to be quite as rewatchable, quite as lasting as his other movies because it is such a simplistic and spare story, but it's still incredible craft on display.
Yeah, I mean, the movie of his that it kind of made me think of the most is Panic Room, in the sense that this kind of feels like him doing just sort of a fun genre exercise. This really feels like him saying, what is the kind of the most stripped down story I can tell? It's a movie that has almost no dialogue outside of the voiceover that Michael Fassbender's character is doing in his head.
It's the entire film's an inner dialogue, with the exception of a couple little lines here and there.
And even though it does sort of follow the same sort of framework as many kind of direct-to-DVD revenge thrillers that people have probably seen, Fincher's kind of more interested in sort of the minutia of what this guy's process is and the sort of contradictions of what he is sort of telling us as an audience in his head. There's a way you could watch this movie as it's almost like masterclass for being an assassin with this guy just sort of explaining here's my process, but then that being contradicted with him occasionally making mistakes or his emotions getting the best of him as he's going through his sort of revenge quest. But what did you think of the film?
Well, so people that don't know me as a film critic, I'm sort of famous for 100-word reviews. This is my thing.
Okay.
I try and sum up a movie in exactly 100 words. By the way, 99 won't do, 101 won't do. It's 100, which is a challenge to hit that exact number. And I just this is a film where I feel like it's a good time for me to read to everyone what I had to say about it, because I think that these 100 words do a really good job of telling you exactly where I am on this film. So I said it's a simplistic, spare story that would be little more than an obvious action flick in the hands of a lesser director, but David Fincher brings such style and craft to the screen that it really soars at times. The script is thin. As we said, almost all the dialogue takes place in Fassbender's head, which I found made it harder for me to engage with the characters. But there's several hysterical doses of humor. I know we want to talk about that. And an outstanding hand-to-hand fight in the middle of the film. As I said, I doubt this will be as lasting as his best work, but it's a propulsive, if quiet, film that is very much worth watching.
Yeah, I think it's almost more interesting to me viewed in this sort of meta text sort of way. Fincher obviously has this reputation, whether deserving or not. I've heard a variety of different opinions from people who've worked with him, but he's got this reputation as being this big perfectionist on set. He'll do hundreds of takes of stuff. He's very, very meticulous about what's in the frame. And this movie, in some ways,
and The Killer is exactly the same.
This sort of feels like David Fincher making fun of that sort of public persona that he has sort of crafted throughout the years of the meticulous perfectionist, and having this guy who, there's all of these scenes where Michael Fassbender is scanning the sort of layout of a building and all the different kind of little windows where people are and where that is in relation to the target that he has to hit, and going through all these sort of minute little details that most filmmakers would probably just sort of pass over. But that kind of is about the movie. It's about someone who is a control freak and a perfectionist dealing with a increasingly chaotic scenario that's kind of spiraling out of control around them. And I think that's part of what makes it really funny. I mean, I'm someone who, I think all of David Fincher's movies are secretly comedies. If you see interviews with him, he has this very wry, sardonic sense of humor. And there is kind of this sort of giddy, juvenile sort of humor that goes through all of his movies. Even something like Seven, like some of the stuff in Seven, you got to admit, like if you were like a 12-year-old boy on the playground, like that's something you would be making up as like a cruel joke.
Yes.
But and this, I think that is very open in this movie. Is like it's very funny, and it to me just like very clearly feels like him kind of making fun of his sort of like persona as a perfectionist.
I mean, I think people should understand this is not a comedy, not by any stretch of the imagination. And I don't think there's a single funny moment that does more than make you laugh for that brief moment and then go away. Like it's not a light film by any stretch of the imagination. But you are right. They break the tension. They bring in this humor that helps you as an audience re-engage and continue to be entertained by what you're seeing on screen. There's a running joke throughout the entire film about Michael Fassbender's aliases that he uses.
Yes.
That, they do it probably 12 or 15 different times.
Right.
Every single time they do it, the audience laughs.
Right.
That's not easy. They're telling the same joke over and over again, and it connects with us every single time, and that's part of David Fincher's genius.
So do you have a favorite Fincher film in mind? I think both of us agree this is probably like minor Fincher by his estimation. This is maybe like, I think like his 7th or 8th best movie if you like rank all of them. But what's one that you think like really stands out as kind of like him at sort of the peak of his powers?
I mean, it's impossible for me to say anything but The Social Network, which I think might have been the best film of the entire decade of the 2010s.
I probably agree with that.
I mean, it's a truly incredible film, and it laid the groundwork for, we see more and more of these films nowadays that are biographies of companies, biographies of building something. That was the film that did it sort of for the first time, and it's just so fabulous. But I mean, if Fight Club is on, I'm not turning it off. Frankly, if The Game is on, I'm not turning it off. If Gone Girl's on, I'm not turning it off. This is a guy who really, and Seven, the ending of Seven is like, the tension in the ending of Seven is unbelievable.
Yeah.
So,
I think
Social Network #1, but I mean, give me any of those others, I'm happy with them.
It's a very close #2 for me. I think Zodiac for me, I think has aged the best of any of his movies. That feels like kind of the best connection of like his interests as a filmmaker with subject matter. Of he's someone who, you know, people think about his movies as being like very dark and like quote unquote twisted.
Yeah.
But you know, he's someone who I think is just as interested in kind of minutia and human behavior, and Zodiac offers him the chance to do a movie that is like 100%. It's about process. It is about like going through files, and it is about kind of like running over information and clues over and over again. It is about like interrogating witnesses and suspects, and about sort of like the minute details of like what they are telling you in those moments. I think that even kind of relates to The Killer a little bit. Of like, you could say this as a movie as like the Michael Fassbender character is sort of just a vessel, and what he's really interested in is like, how do these minor supporting characters act when they're faced with, okay, I have this guy that's clearly going to like kill me right now, and how do those people act in sort of their final moments, which I think brings me to kind of, not to give too much away in spoilers, like you mentioned the great fight scene in this movie. There's a scene with Tilda Swinton kind of later in the movie,
which is like the only dialogue scene in the movie.
That I think is like the best scene in the movie, and it's because like the way she reacts to when he, you know, comes to visit her is so unusual and so completely different than how everyone else is reacting that it even kind of throws him off. And you see he's Michael Fassbender just so, I think, perfectly cast in this. He's someone who I think he looks like a shark. You know what I mean? Like, he just looks like this, like, impeccably handsome, like, predatory creature, and I think, like, is able to do so much kind of subtly with his eyes and, like, little twitches to where, like, you kind of can see into this guy's soul, but not really, and that's kind of the point of it.
Look, the last thing I want to say about this film, and we've got to move on because we've got another interesting movie to talk about. You compared it to Zodiac, and I think you're right to some extent, but I want to give a warning to the audience because I know there are a lot of people who found Zodiac a little bit tedious and a little long, and it's not the crowd pleaser that some of Fincher's other films is.
Your loss, if you're any of those people.
No, but I think this film is more propulsive. It's shorter than Zodiac, considerably shorter than Zodiac, comes in just under 2 hours, and I think it's an easier watch. Not saying it's a better film, you know, not talking about that from a critical standpoint, because I think Zodiac, from that standpoint, is better, is more award-worthy and more important than this one is. But from purely the standpoint of sitting in the theater and enjoying it, I think this is a better procedure kind of film than Zodiac was.
Sure, it's a fun kind of nasty noir genre movie,
Yeah.
and if you're going in expecting that, then I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. All right, our next movie we're going to talk about does not come out this weekend, but it comes out next weekend.
Right.
We're a little ahead of it. It's Sofia.
But there are plenty of reviews, so we're not braced with the embargo.
It premiered at the festivals already. It's Sofia Coppola's Priscilla Presley movie, aptly called just Priscilla.
Yeah.
You've kind of hinted to me you have some feelings about this movie, so I just want to cede the floor to you for you to just to unload. I'm the therapist and this is the therapy couch.
Okay, so this is a film that's based on Priscilla Presley's autobiography.
Mm-hmm.
She is an executive producer on the film and consulted with Sofia Coppola about what they wanted to put on screen, which is why it is remarkable to me that I gained almost no insight at all into who Priscilla is, what her relationship with Elvis was like, into who Elvis was. How on earth could Priscilla Presley make a film about her relationship with Elvis and tell us almost nothing about that relationship? It feels very simplistic, very quiet. For some strange reason, Elvis doesn't sing in the entire movie.
Well, I'm sure the Elvis estate probably has something to say about
I
that.
agree, but still, as an audience, there's a lot of music. There's a lot of period music from the 60s in it, but none of it is Elvis Presley music, and maybe they couldn't afford it. I don't know what the situation was with the estate and the such like that, but it's off-putting to me that we get a film about Elvis and Priscilla's relationship that doesn't get into their relationship very much, doesn't talk to us that much about, like, is Elvis supposed to be a monster? Or are they supposed to really be in love? I wasn't really sure from this film. And if there's one person on this planet who could give us those answers, it's Priscilla Presley. Why didn't she in this film? So I found it a frustrating movie, not a particularly interesting movie. I thought the performances were all pretty flat, which surprised me because I'd heard good things about the performances, and maybe I'm out there and there are other critics who feel differently. I just came away nothing but disappointed in this film.
My hot take is I think it's pretty good.
Okay, that's fine.
But I'm sort of viewing it as like, I kind of don't care about Elvis. This is me being kind of like on Millennial Mountain of just sort of like, I'm not invested in the Elvis mythology, the Priscilla Presley mythology, kind of their relationship with each other. I think I viewed it in the context of sort of Sofia Coppola and kind of like a lot of the films that she's made. I kind of like joked with someone afterwards as like, she's kind of become our premier chronicler of lonely young woman in extravagant house.
She's done a lot of those, yes.
There is an aspect to this movie that I think is kind of her taking this sort of like rotten fairy tale sort of idea and kind of applying it to Priscilla Presley's life of this sort of, I got invested in the movie in the sense of like, what must it be like to be kind of like a young girl and you get sort of swept off your feet by this like teen idol guy and you get to live in sort of the magical castle. You get the princess treatment, but then it's all hollow in the end. And what happens when that just sort of becomes boredom, when maybe like there's actually not this kind of romantic relationship there? What if you're just sort of like a piece of furniture in this sort of extravagant house? And I will say, I don't think this is
but
like,
we don't get in her head that much to hear what that is doing to her.
I
For
think,
the most part,
I think you can kind of see that though, and I think there's something in the sort of performances that there's a sort of a vacantness that kind of comes through to me. I don't know. There's something
I
about
don't want to
kind of
spend
the
2 hours
lull.
in a movie theater watching someone who's vacant, though.
That's fair.
I mean, that's my
Yeah.
response.
And I do think it really drags kind of in the middle of the movie. I think this is like far from. I think
because it has nothing to say.
If you want to see a better version of what Sofia Coppola did in this movie, like just watch Marie Antoinette. Like that's, I think, a pretty underrated movie that was derided at the time that I actually think is kind of brilliant. But you know, I think in the conversation of her larger career, I sort of got on the wavelength of the movie. I think it really drags in places. I actually quite like Jacob Elordi as Elvis, but I sort of liked it in the sense of this kind of like fun casting of like, he seems to be kind of the teen idol of now and kind of like giving it sort of this modern sheen that helps it from being kind of like, oh, we're watching this sort of stuffy old period piece. I don't know. I got into the vibe of the movie, even if I think it is like, it's boredom, while both the point kind of makes it a little hard to sit through as an audience in certain times.
Let me ask you a key question of the movie.
Sure.
Why did they fall in love?
I think if you're a teenage girl like her and you see like a big pop star that takes interest in you, and you know, I think it is.
You just naturally fall in love. Okay,
right,
well,
there's
why
a
did he fall in love with
fantasy.
her then?
I think that's left ambiguous, and I'm sort of fine with it sort of being ambiguous as to, like, maybe to him, she's just sort of like...
something he can control.
Something he can control, and something he can just sort of use whenever he wants to. And, you know, there's an aspect to the movie where they're not really that, like, physically intimate with each other. He seems to mostly just want her for, like, the paparazzi aspect of, like, I get to have, you know, put on the show of, like, I'm a loving family man and stuff, but, like, there doesn't really seem to be that much.
Yeah, but for most of the movie, he's keeping her hidden because it would have stained his reputation to have a girlfriend and a fiance and eventually a wife. Look, I can accept. I know I'm not in the minority, but there are plenty of critics who agree with you. There are also plenty who agree with me. This is clearly a divisive film. I can't help but compare it a little bit to Baz Luhrmann's Elvis film from last year, nominated for Best Picture, which is nothing but over the top and propulsive. And
they are totally opposite movies in a very interesting way.
There's so much fun on screen in that film. And that is a film that tries to really get into Elvis's character and also the character played by Tom Hanks of the Colonel, you know, Elvis's manager. This film, to me, didn't try and get into any of the characters. It doesn't have any of the bombast or excitement, the thrill of Elvis that film did. So to me, look, they come out in years back to back to each other. You cannot help but, I would imagine that a lot of the people who will see this film will be people who saw that film.
Yeah.
And by comparison, this one just is not there.
Well, I believe that is about all we have for this week, but look forward to having you back next time as we...
You're going to have me back even though I disagree with you?
It's fine. I'm not going to die on a hill over the Priscilla Presley movie.
Yeah, good call.
we have other things we can fight about later in the year.
Yeah, and we've got some busy... This is a great time to be reviewing movies. We have so many films coming up.
We apparently have a Marvel movie that's coming out that like I keep forgetting is coming out. We have, you know, I was just telling you, there's a Miyazaki movie, there's a Michael Mann movie, there's Paul Giamatti running a boarding school. There's just a plethora for us to talk about.
It's going to be a fun time to be a critic.
Yeah.